Good afternoon, everyone, and very much welcome to a token of appreciation, the value of tokenization for financial services, a webinar hosted by Two Tokens, Holland FinTech, and the Dutch Association of Banks. We're very much happy to be able to welcome you here today from this beautiful studio in Hilversum during this, of course, quite special times where it's pretty hard to have everyone in one place because, of course, we would love to have been all together with you for all the interactions, questions, and learnings that we could share with you today. But we'll have to do with this studio, which is actually magnificent and beautiful, but we had to adapt it a bit, hence the plastic screens between the two of us. But we're very much looking forward to having you today, being able to share some insights about tokenization, what it could mean for the financial industry, and of course, hopefully bring you some knowledge that you can take home and use in practice. I'm here in the studio today with Alex Bausch. Hi, Alex.
Hi, good to see you.
Good to have you here on behalf of Two Tokens. I'm very much looking forward to our session today. We're going to make it a lot of fun.
And this is the kickoff for the whole new program for this year, right? So
no, exactly. I'm very happy that we're able to collaborate here between Two Tokens and Holland FinTech to put down together a program about how this technology could actually accelerate change in the financial industry. I think there's a big potential, and very happy that we could start the journey to explore that together today.
Yes, very happy myself. Thank you for having us here.
Yeah, great. And but of course, as said, not everyone's in the studio here today, so we can also look at our some speakers at home. So if we look at our program, we'll see that we'll go through a state of the market, which will be represented by Robert van Altena by PwC. Robert, very much welcome. Then we'll get Claire Wermers from CMS, who will tell us about the legal aspect of tokenization. Claire, very happy that you can join us. Then Alex will take us through the Two Tokens roadmap and tell us about how the legal implications will be used in practice and giving you practical handholds to be used for your own projects. Then we'll have Marjan van der Plas, who will tell us about the Dutch Association of Banks white paper on tokenization. They did a study on how they think that banks could make proper use of these developments and technologies. And I'm very happy, Marjan, that you're here, that you could explain to us how the banks are looking at this. And of course, that will give us sufficient food also for discussion later on. That will be followed by the use cases that we believe that should be working in 2021. We'll have Marleen here in the studio to explain that further together with Alex. Very much looking forward to that because that will give us some practical handles on the cases that we'll have on the agenda. And then I'm very much looking forward to our panel discussion to wrap it all up for you. And hopefully we'll also be able to address some of the questions that you might have at home while listening to this broadcast. At the table then we have Kim Schneider from Rabobank. Marjan will be joining us again. And we have Leonard Franke from the AFM. Very much welcome, Kim and Leonard, for joining us as well from your homes. And we're very much looking forward to your insights on behalf after all the presentations and having a vivid discussion with you. I think without further ado, Alex, what do you think? Shall we get started?
We have a full program, so let's do it.
We better get on with it, right? So, okay, but before we actually head into it, we'd like to know a little bit more about the public that we have today. So you are able to answer a poll question right now if you're logged in. And we're very keen to understand a little bit about your background, to understand how you might use the information that we're sharing with you today, and also to tailor the information for follow-on sessions that we're going to make. I see that the first ones are coming in. I actually see that it's quite a diverse audience because I see actually across all the different perspectives. I see the public side is a bit less represented.
So it's not just bankers looking at us today.
No, exactly. We see researchers, developers. Good to see the tech side well involved, regulators and entrepreneurs. So I think it's quite a nice audience that we have with different perspectives. And I think that's also really good because it's definitely something that you need a diverse ecosystem for to turn it into a success. So
and I think it's good to note that it's not just people from the Netherlands calling in, right? So we have people from all over the world.
Yeah. Indeed. It's not that we can't speak Dutch. It's actually because we believe that there's an audience out there that is able to follow us if we do things in English. And indeed, it's something where the international community plays an important role to further develop. I'll let the poll roll for all of you to fill in if you haven't been able to do so far, and then you'll be able to get the answers on screen. But I think it's a really nice diverse group. But I don't want to let Robert wait much longer for his presentation, so I'll quickly go on with one short intermezzo, and that's the background of Holland FinTech. For the few viewers that have not seen it before, Holland FinTech is an ecosystem that tries to educate, connect, and basically make people work on technology and how it basically enhances financial services. Digital finance is really a big topic these days, and it's really important that we collaborate to actually make it all work. All the different stakeholders, from policymakers, regulators, market participants, investors, universities, everyone basically needs to share the learnings and connect to see how we can evolve this further. Similarly, like we're doing here today, also together with 2tokens. We're doing that for a very diverse landscape of all kinds of different parties. Here you can see how the landscape of Dutch fintech companies has evolved over the years. And actually I can highlight already that we'll be publishing a new version quite soon to actually give you a taste of what's going on in the Dutch market with regard to fintech. And if you're curious to learn more outside of tokenization, I definitely recommend you to check out the program on our website, where you can see all the different topics that we have, including tokenization, but also other means of collaboration, ways we can have impact, or ways that we could actually share the story about how digital finance is transforming the economy works. And really, I see that this is a big part of what we're doing here today as well. Try to educate people, connect them, and hopefully be able to spark some good projects that actually benefit people. And then without further ado, I'm really looking forward to hear Robert today. Robert, very much welcome. Do we have audio?
Thank you very much.
Indeed.
Thank you very much, Don and Alex.
Good to have you here.
Yeah, looking forward to your talk, Robert. Right. So please take it away.
Take it away. First starting, PwC. I would be very curious, a couple of PwC people in the call, which role they would have selected in asking what is your current role? Because in general, what you will see, firms like PwC, we are, I would say, without not becoming a banker, but all other roles in researching, developing, even investing in time and in joint operations, I think they apply to us. In general, you can say in the Netherlands, I'm part of the, I'm a partner with PwC. I'm part of the global community on for tokens. We combine blockchain, DLT, tokens, and crypto in one global community. The number of people working in this community within PwC is, I did some calculation. I'm an auditor from background, so I do some calculation, and I'm going to 916 people who are part of the community already, so are really active in the field of tokenization. So they can imagine that on the whole, which is global and internationally, we try to be very connected to this market. And I think also my presentation of state of the market, if you ask me what is the state of the market, is out of this PwC perspective. Having the idea that we are around globally in various aspects. I will get to that by going through the slide in more detail. But in general, 1,000 people already working. Of course, the PwC worldwide is 260,000 people working with PwC, so only 1,000. But at the same time, it's quite a large and active community. So we think it's also very important because, by the way, if you look at tokenizations, consensus protocols, we are basically a middleman organization to be cut out, perhaps. So for us, this is more than only advice. It's also about existing in the future. Also for banks, I think that may be one of the things that to be discussed. What does tokenization mean for the current organizations? Going to the market perspective, as I stated, please allow me to be immodest. That means, it's only my vision, our vision from PwC. That doesn't mean that the whole market is being covered by this. And basically, you can state only me being here, a PwC partner with gray hair, with a beard, talking about tokens. That means that tokenization must have left the early adoption phase and must have reached the tipping point. And I think that's the case. I think that's a very important first observation. That is, it's a serious game. It's not about trying in the back homes or at university. It's really into the business area. I think that's a very important idea. Going through the graph I've brought with me, you see two axes. The vertical axis, short-term value, and I think that's value we bring to the market as PwC, so connected to tokenization initiatives. And the bigger the bubble, the bigger the ball, the more we are active in this field. And I think then in general, perhaps the market is more active in that field. And going to the right, it's also the initiatives we are working on, but these are long-term, medium-term focused initiatives. Let me take you through the bubbles. Audit. Our traditional role as PwC is auditing. That means that we tell the stakeholders, the society, that things are to be trusted, can be trusted. That's what we have. We say it's PwC have seen it, we've audited, so it's okay. And it's not a very big bubble currently, because we in the marketplace, and I also had this conversation with you, Alex. Token is often very much connected, or perhaps with the crypto idea. That's that tokenization is about Bitcoin, it's about dodginess, it's about the whole thing, and that brings for us as auditors a kind of international idea that you should not deal with this crypto. And that's
so how does PwC deal with that dilemma? Huh?
Now, what we did is for the dilemma is we don't consider a dilemma, because I think we should step in. And one of the things we, for instance, did, we are now the auditor of Tezos. We said, okay, let's pick that up. And of course, the onboarding of a client like Tezos will take us 2 years almost, with all the risk people in the globally within PwC and all kind of safeguards. But I think we should really pick up the challenge and become the auditor. Whether we become the auditor of Tether, I don't think so. But for now, it's becoming auditor of Tezos, one step. And do realize that we also are auditors from existing clients who get into the tokenization business. So it's not about choosing to go for our clients go there, so we have to go there also.
So you're saying that you're beyond the dilemma, the adoption of crypto and tokenization is at a point that it's no longer a dilemma.
It's not a dilemma whether we're going to deal with it, but how we're going to deal with it. As auditors, we know if the music stops and everything loses value, everybody will look at the auditor saying, "Oh, but you're the one telling us that it's that the value is all right, so we're going to bring the claims to you." That's of course our role often in the claims. The moment we start auditing, it's with this due diligence in mind, but at the same time, is our role. So we pick up this role already in a certain, like Tezos, but also at other clients. I think the other role, which is a bigger role already for us, is in the supply chain. And that means that clients of ours, like we have in Germany, the automotive industry has designed a kind of DLT around supply, which is a very intense supply chain. And we are there to bring in a control framework. So we can we bring them the safeguards and security. We've got a blockchain control framework, the whole thing. So also there, from a financial service perspective, you can say it's about payments. It's often supply chain driven by corporates, but then the banking and financial elements are in the payment areas of that. And we're also connected to this, also bringing this supply chain. I think an example of this is the mortgage process. There's a pilot in the Netherlands to bring mortgages to the people, which is also kind of supply chain thinking, which perhaps may connect to digital assets, but I think it's a very important supply chain driven energy for tokens in there. So we don't talk about crypto, it's about tokens, it's about blockchain and being in the middle of it. And the last, which is the biggest, is digital assets. And of course, also crypto is in this. I think you can state that besides Tezos, the major exchanges in the world, we are somehow connected to them. Sometimes as an advisor, not as an auditor often, but as an advisor. So knowing what's going on, I think there's a huge strength in this market. For sure, if you look at digital assets, by the regulation, I put it in the middle of the sheet, the regulatory, it becomes, and Claire will talk about this, about regulation. The more open the more regulated the business becomes, the more mature, and that means that this whole digital assets will make a huge leap in this. For instance, in the Netherlands, we're currently working on the digital assets from a crypto perspective for people, for organizations who have to enroll themselves out of the Anti-Money Laundering Directive number 5. So being basically KYC oriented, which is not about tokens, but it's about KYC as such.
Yeah.
If we look at digital assets, I've got a couple examples which I can mention. Normally, we are not allowed to mention names as auditors because we are very careful about name dropping when it comes to clients. But I have a couple of clients who allowed me to bring some names. The thing we work on, which I think are digital assets, which are is about tokens, is we're currently working on a COVID solution. So I hope in 2 weeks' time, and it's also connected to digital identity, we can bring to the market also touching on Internet of Things, a test for school children who go to school, which is then translated into a token, which is then safeguarded. It will be opened in a week's time, 2 weeks' time, and we're already working on that. So it's a digital asset, but the digital asset is then, the token is then the test. So you perform a test, which is picked up with a QR code, and that's brought into in a DLT modus. So I think a very strong example of digital assets, not being crypto. And another example we're currently working on is for the second bank. There's a new bank to be initiated in the Netherlands, and it's about debt help. So debt relief. People who are in schuld. And they are also connected to a token, because schuldhulp is something which is very privacy oriented. So we bring a kind of mechanism, a compliance mechanism, using a token. That's just the basis for the.
It would be interesting to map that token against the roadmap, Robert, huh?
Yeah, we already talked about it, Alex. I think that's something we should really pick up. And the last one is a very interesting one. Is an asset which is an asset in the world. It means there's a prize going to be issued. It's the Prix d'Espoir, which is combined to the DJ of the Year champions. So the gestos of this world are connected to the Greta Thunbergs, and there's also a blockchain behind it, a token. It's also working on that one, currently, which is also very interesting.
Nice.
That is the short-term element.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, Robert. I think these cases. I do have to emphasize the time a little bit because we're running out.
Sorry. I only brought 2 slides, but I will go on.
So that was the nice trick with the 2 slides. Yeah.
And then at the end, if you take the previous slide, at the end it's all about digital identity. It's about platforming. It's about Internet of Things. Because what you look is, I think, are building blocks for coming to these concepts. And for instance, at PwC, we have a smart contract audit team already of 20 people. So we are really advancing in this. So this tokenization maturity of this tokenization world is really also, we can really observe this also in practice. Yeah. Next slide, there's the second slide, which is unreadable, I think, for the people at home. But you can find this when you type in PwC STO, and you will find this report. We make every year, PwC produces a report which brings the latest in the field of token offerings and tokenization. And I think it's very interesting. If you look at the left chart, but you can read it in more detail when you download it, it's about the number of tokens issued directly, security tokens offering. It's about 4 billion already. So this is not about Bitcoin having a peak in this market price. This is about really issuing tokens which are backed up by assets, loan, mortgage portfolios.
And for my understanding, and for the viewers' understanding, are these tokens traded on a secondary market, or are they just kept? What is happening to these tokens?
What you see is traded not in the public market, but I see a market developing itself between financial institutions, which is currently OTC, over-the-counter driven, but it's getting into a marketplace. I think that's at least it's very much possible that it will become a really exchange market that meets all the MiFID requirements. Claire will talk about MiFID and MiCAR and the whole thing. So the market is preparing for such, and I see the peak of this is still in the Far East, in Asia and the US, I think in general, but it's getting too close to us. And being a FAOC-driven country, I would say, let's pick that up. And in the right chart, you see a chart of tokenization, which is very US-driven, and which is tokens which are non-monetary tokens, so to say. And what I expect is that these 2 worlds will empower each other. I think the more tokens we see in
I think we have to move on. So what I will suggest, in any case, we can share this report also with attendees of today, so they will have access to the report itself.
We should have Robert back in one of the in the sessions this year to report on the state of the European
I think so.
market. Yeah.
Imagine what he can do with 3 slides or 4.
More than happy.
And then I will give him 1 slide from now on.
No, so so thank you very much, Robert. I think it's really good start to kick off the discussion today. As you mentioned, I think we can really take it the bridge now to Claire, who will take us through the more legal aspects of the tokenization. And because there's a lot on the wagon at the moment, the EU is very active. We see that basically all the local governments are very active on this field. So, Claire, we're very much looking forward to hearing your views on this and taking our viewers through the legal landscape.
And the viewers can also pose questions, right? So.
No, exactly. It's good to emphasize that again. Perhaps indeed is that you could all, if you type your questions in the Q&A box, we'll moderate them, and if you're lucky, I'll get them here on the screen and try to post them to our panel or the speakers at the moment. Yeah.
Many thanks, Don and Alex. Thank you for having me. I'm a lawyer at CMS. I've been involved in various tokenization projects in the field of energy, real estate, STOs, and I'm very happy to be an advisory board member of 2 Tokens. They work on very exciting projects, and I'm sure that Alex and Marleen will explore those use cases in more detail today. Well, the legal aspects of tokenization, maybe it's not the most exciting part of a tokenization initiative, but I think it's very important because it can have major impact on the feasibility, the cost and the timing of a token initiative. If you need to get a registration or if you need to get a license, that will take time. Well, as in other European countries, in the Netherlands, we have implemented the 5th Anti-Money Laundering Directive. And as a result, crypto service providers need to comply with the Anti-Money Laundering Act. And we also have our first legal definition, at least, for virtual currency. Okay. What does it mean? It means that crypto service providers need to register with the Dutch Central Bank. You are a crypto service provider if you exchange virtual currency into fiduciary currencies. So if you exchange cryptos, for instance, into euros. You do not need to register if you exchange bitcoins into Ripple, for instance. You also need to register if you offer custodian wallet services. Well, you need to register before you intend to provide these services in the Netherlands, and you can do so by filing a form with the Dutch Central Bank. What you need to do, you need to provide information on your business. The policymakers and certain shareholders will need to be tested. You need to provide information on how you will comply with the AML requirements. So far, so good, but in practice, it is not that easy. So far, only 15 crypto service providers have been included in the public register of the DCB. While a significant number of parties is still in the registration process. And also a significant number of crypto service providers decided not to proceed, which means that they cannot offer these services in the Netherlands. Including one of my clients. It was just not feasible for them to comply with the AML and Sanction Act requirements imposed by the Dutch Central Bank. This is also an issue that has been raised by the Dutch Association of Bitcoin Companies. In November, they sent a letter to the Dutch Central Bank and said, well, the requirements imposed by the Dutch Central Bank are too strict. They go beyond the European requirements, and that will affect our position in Europe.
Because that would be my question, Claire. How does this compare to other European countries?
Yes, well, I must say it's difficult to assess the requirements in other countries, but as well, CMS has offices also in Luxembourg and in Germany. And when I speak to my colleagues, I indeed have the impression that they might have a point, that it is possible that the restriction imposed by the Dutch central bank are more strict than when you compare it, for instance, in Luxembourg. But also the Dutch Minister of Finance got involved before he resigned, Wopke Hoekstra. So I think we will have to see and wait what will happen with all the crypto service providers that are still in the process of their registration. I think what is very helpful is that the Dutch central bank provided some guidance on when you are deemed to be active in the Netherlands, because we received a lot of questions on that subject. It was not clear if you were deemed to be active in the Netherlands and if you should have registered in the Netherlands. If you pay a search engine, if you really target Dutch customers, if you include reviews of Dutch customers on your website, you will be these are factors that are relevant to assess if you are active in the Netherlands. And if so, I think you should have a careful look and see if you need to register with the Dutch central bank. Well, maybe before we dive into what is, in my view, the most important development, Mika or MyCar, I think it's good to look at the existing regulatory framework. Because if you issue tokens, it is possible that you are under supervision under the existing regulatory framework. Often this classification has been used. If you look at the economic function of tokens, you have investment tokens, a token used for funding. They can have the characteristics of bonds or shares, and these can be regulated unless you can make use of an exemption. The same applies for payment tokens, so tokens that are used for value transfers. They can qualify as electronic money. Well, it is possible that you need to register as a crypto service provider. Please also bear in mind the prohibition to attract or have the disposal of redeemable funds. So unless you can make use of an exemption, you can be regulated. And then we have utility tokens. These tokens give access to a specific application or network, and these are typically not regulated. But you should always look at the characteristics of a token and see if you fall within the scope of the existing regulatory framework.
Yep.
Okay. Yes, this is not a complete overview, I should say. But if your token qualifies as a security, you need to have an approved prospectus. There are also very useful exemptions. Or if your token qualifies as a unit in a collective investment scheme, the manager should have a license. And securities units in a collective investment scheme, but also other financial instruments. It's good to note that the service provider, so the platform or the advisor that makes specific recommendations, they will be regulated. They need a MiFID license.
Yeah, does it come down, Claire, to basically the situation that it's about the relationship that you enter into with your client, or basically the product that you're talking about, that determines to a large extent the regulatory regime that you fall under, regardless of the technology that you use, right?
Yes, right, and you should really look at the characteristics of your token and how you present your token to the market. For instance, I've seen several market parties that said, well, my token is a utility token, I'm not regulated. But if you look at the token, well, it provided for a return on investment. It was possible to trade the token. It was possible that they had some voting rights. So if you look at the Howey test that they have in the US based on case law, you could say it really was an investment. So then I think you should have a careful look at your token again, and maybe it does qualify as a security, which means that you need to have a prospectus, and it means that the platform where the token is traded, needs a MiFID license. I think this is already included on my next slide. So, good question. I've also seen what's also very popular is tokenization projects with respect to real estate, art, or ships, for instance, and where you have such collective investment where you also can have a return on your investment. You should be careful that it can qualify as a unit in a collective investment scheme, which means that you might need a license or you should register for the sub-threshold regime. But I really would like to point out there are restrictions, but there are also a lot of useful exemptions, especially for private placements or for small offerings. So if you want to see if there's investor appetite, you can make use of such exemption, and if it's a success, apply for a license or convert into another structure. So maybe we should move on to, I think, the most relevant development we have, and that's the digital finance package. In September, the European Commission adopted the digital finance package. It includes a digital finance strategy, a proposal for regulations on markets in crypto assets. I will refer to it as MiCA, but as it is a regulation, maybe we should refer to it as MiCAR or MiCAR. And there's also a proposal for a pilot regime, which is also very, very interesting and maybe a good subject for the panel discussion. But given the time, I will focus on MiCA.
And Leonard is in the call. He can explain about the regime.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Well, MiCA is a very comprehensive proposal. It's 150 pages, and basically it will cover all crypto assets, but also services that relate to crypto assets. So it will also cover utility tokens, stable coins, and the parties that provide custody services, provide investment recommendation. But what I think it's good to note that it will not apply to crypto assets that qualify as financial instruments. So also after MiCA, you still should look at your token and see if it qualifies as a security or a unit in a collective investment scheme. And to a certain extent, it will also not apply to electronic money, but there are some exemptions. Well, MiCA does provide us with some useful definitions. Maybe we can go to the key elements given the time. As said, it is a very, very broad proposal. But I think to highlight a few requirements, crypto asset service providers, so parties that provide platform services, advice, investment advice, that transmit orders, they will all be caught by MiCA. They need to apply for an authorization and they need to have physical presence in the EU. I think what's very positive about MiCA is that it provides for European passports. So if you are authorized in the Netherlands, you can also provide these services in Germany and in the other countries in the EU, which I think is very helpful because most of the tokenization initiatives have no boundaries.
Just to ask a question here, Claire, how is this going to affect what the Dutch Central Bank is proposing with the service providers? Is this going to have an effect, or is this going to touch one another, or what do you see?
There definitely is an overlap, so I think we have to wait and see how they will handle that. But I think if you already applied as a crypto service provider, I think you will comply with one element of the requirements that you need to comply with to get the authorization as crypto asset service provider. I think what's also interesting is that MiCA provides for a regime on market abuse. So inside information should be made public. There's a prohibition on insider dealing and market manipulation. And issuers of crypto assets need to publish information on their crypto asset. And depending on the type of token, there are more strict rules to comply with. For instance, for stable coins. As said, sorry, Don.
No. Yeah, I think we have to. I think it's really interesting how you the overview that you're giving, but at the same time, the clock is ticking quite fast. So can you wrap it up?
Sure.
I think we'll touch upon the rest of the subjects. I think in the panel discussion.
Perfect. Yeah, well, maybe one note, MiCA is a regulation, so it will have a direct effect in the Netherlands. So if it has been adopted at the European level, it will have immediate effect in the Netherlands. And maybe the AFM has a view on this, but it's expected to be effective maybe next year, maybe in 2 years. We will see. And I think MiCA also should be implemented in the two tokens roadmap. So maybe
we'll get to that right now. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's a nice bridge. Thank you, Claire. It's a really nice overview, I think. And indeed, let's give the floor to you, Alex.
Well, thank you. And for those who don't know two tokens, we started a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, and we had over 1,000 people participate in this movement, right? So it's a public ecosystem, and we aim to clarify everything about tokenization, because there's a lot of misconceptions. You can understand this if there's people who've never worked in the industry who don't understand tokenization, but in fact there's a lot of people in banking, in finance, in legal regulatory who are also new to tokenization. And so as we found out during the project with Claire, with yourself, with Marlene, with the Erasmus University, with Leonard, we found out there is a big demand for information and experimentation among professionals. So the ecosystem was started, and we built a purpose-driven framework to show what tokenization, how it is applied, and how it is used. And instead of making this an academic exercise, we said, all right, let's just take use cases that are out there with real companies, with real organizations that use tokenization today and want to understand, what needs to be done in terms of legal regulatory, what needs to be done in terms of token taxonomy, all that good stuff. And so we decided last year to do 3 use cases. We had a long list of 25 use cases, and our board of advisors, who includes people from academics, people from government, people from the industry. And from the 25, we chose 3 use cases that represented a utility token, represented a security token, and represented a payment token of sorts. Yeah. And the partners in the ecosystem participated, and we started to look at what is the taxonomy of a token, how is the token used within a token economy, what is the business case? Is this something that is just to make a quick buck and is really a Ponzi scheme, or is this really something to support an existing business? But more importantly, what kind of ecosystem is supporting the tokens? Because you can build a token economy, but if there's no ecosystem that uses the token to exchange the value, there is there's no real purpose for the token. So what the Two Tokens Foundation, because in the meantime, we have formalized the movement in a foundation. We did that last year. I'm the chairperson. We have an executive board of 5. What we have decided in 2021 is basically follow the same timeline that we did in the first year. And so in the first year we did 4 phases. Phase 1 was was discussions and roundtables, the foundational discussions. In COVID, doing roundtables in the room is going to be interesting to see how we're going to do that. So
a bit more challenging.
Challenge. So we'll have to do that online. Then the second phase is that we work on the workshops and the working groups. Again, we have selected 3 use cases. We will introduce them at a later stage today. And then we will disseminate all this information in online webinars and masterclasses. So you're all invited to join. 2Tokens, as such, is publishing all these webinars, as you can see today. And when MICA was published in September, October of last year, we were asked for an advice and also for the government. And we did a special session, an hour and a half, just on MICA. If you want to see it or if you want to listen it, go to Spotify, you can find that session.
Yep,
and we can go in more detail. Because sharing this knowledge, that's what is required for adoption. Because that's all we're interested in, is adoption of the token technology. And secondly, and we should not forget this, Claire and the research team with Olivier Ricke and Rotterdam School of Management and Cambridge, and we have created tokenroadmap.nl. You can all go to tokenroadmap.nl and see what steps need to be taken if you want to do something with the token. We work very closely with the International Token Standardization Association, who created a standardization database, if you will. So every project can classify the token against the ITSA. And so the token roadmap.nl uses the ITSA to help you classify, are you a security token, are you a utility token, are you a payment token? We don't advise you, but at least it gives you a guideline of what you need to do if you think of doing something with a token today.
Yep.
And if you need more detail, please go see one of the partners in the ecosystem, whether that is a lawyer, whether that is a bank or an exchange or a technology provider, or maybe even go to Leonard of the AFM. We are more than happy to help you answer the questions, because at this time there are more questions than answers, sometimes it seems like. And now with MICA, we are going to continuously update this token roadmap.
Yeah.
All right, so much for the introduction. So the purpose of the 2Tokens Foundation, and that's why I'm so happy we are aligned with Holland FinTech, is to develop frameworks, develop standards with the banks, with the industry partners, look at legal regulatory alignment, and maintain the token roadmap, right?
Yeah.
That's it. I try to do it quick,
I think you're doing well there, Alex. It's,
there you go.
I think it's great. It's great to see what you've built already now over the past year, and I'm really curious how we can collaborate on building that further this year.
Yeah.
And it's really nice also that, of course, we're not just doing that with 2Tokens on FinTech, but also we found the Dutch Association of Banks very willing to. Of course, they did their research into the developments of crypto assets and how they think that banks should respond to that. But it's also nice to see that we actually can collaborate on knowledge sharing at that level. So, Marianne, I'm very happy that you're willing to share the thoughts of the Dutch Association of Banks here with us today. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm unmuted, so I'm happy to be
Very
here.
good.
Thank you so much for the invite.
Yeah, very much looking forward to your talk. So please introduce yourself and tell us about the work for the Dutch Association of Banks.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction already. I will continue on it. I work indeed for ABN AMRO as a compliance officer, innovation and technology. Before that, I've been involved in innovation for 6 years, mainly in the field of blockchain and crypto assets as well. Together with Kim, I'm part of the expert group of the Dutch Banking Association, the expert group of crypto assets, and we've been involved in the drafting of the position paper I'm now going to elaborate on. So, okay. Well, the reason why the NVB and the expert group was so keen on writing the position paper is in fact quite obvious. If you look at DLT and crypto assets, they are a driver for innovation. They're a driver for the digital economy, and they're at least a driver also for the future of finance. And in that sense, it is a key role also for the Dutch economy in that sense. So it's important to keep that in mind. We see significant benefits for markets, for the participants in those markets and clients, whether it's because of increased liquidity, more efficiencies, and other things. So in a way, it's definitely an upside there as well. And we also see that it's increasingly becoming mainstream and mature. It is being considered a new asset class for some, but we also see that regulation, as has been highlighted by Claire, there are quite some developments there. Also in terms of innovation, you see professional alliances and consortia actively developing both on the infrastructure side as the proposition side. So there's a lot going on. And obviously, we also see a role for the financial sector there. If you look at the content of the paper, it is, in a way, we provide a position for the Dutch banks on crypto assets. We explain what we feel is the field. We're zooming in on the opportunities. We're also zooming in on managing the risks, because we do believe it is a risk-reward balance there. It is like, the upside is very important. However, as banks, there's no need to tell everybody that we also have a fiduciary and a societal responsibility to keep in mind. So it is really about balancing opportunities and risks, and also see what can be the role of banks. So we've been touching on that as well in the paper, and of course we've been at least supporting or advising on what we feel is necessary to develop that, to jointly develop that the new future that is an innovation-friendly regulatory framework for crypto assets. If you look at the opportunities, we have been looking into, okay, what could be the opportunities for the financial sector? In a way, I've been rephrasing it as traditional banks, as that we see ourselves a bit, is that in a way, if you look at the crypto asset value chain, it is like and unlike the current financial system. It has some very new features and some very new challenges and asking for new capabilities. However, you also see that there are some recurring and more traditional roles also being there. That needs probably to be redefined. However, there are still old features in place that should not be forgotten. So if you look at opportunities for banks, it could be that if you look at one of the important roles that banks are now playing currently is the gatekeeper role. So there could be really a good opportunity there to fill in and define and further design the gatekeeping role between fiat and crypto asset worlds. How should we shape it? What are compliance and KYC features that we could keep in mind? And also, if you look at the commercial side, how can you bridge the gap between the new and the old world? For example, providing interfaces for professional investors, custodial services perhaps, but also if you look at funding and lending arrangements, the complexer they are, the more there is a need for intermediary services and capabilities and brokerage and networking capabilities as well. So there's still a lot to discover there. We could help in advising on portfolio diversification for investors and other clients. And of course, access to finance and investment. We have a huge client base. So there is a huge to discover there and to also further fill in. If you look at one of the things that I would like to highlight as well, if you look at the gatekeeper role, it might be a bit of a, as Claire also mentioned, if you look at the current legislative and regulatory developments, market integrity and client integrity are very important elements. They're still under development, so to speak, but they are very important. Investor protection, duty of care, these types of elements are important. And bank, it might be a bit underestimated, but they have those capabilities, so they might become an important player to make sure that is being leveraged on. The key recommendations we're giving is, in a way, we underline and support the fact that crypto assets are of strategic value for the EU digital economy, and especially if you look at the harmonization that we feel is very important on the single digital economy. So we do underpin both on the EU and the NL side the regulatory developments taking place, and we are stressing standardization and harmonization as such. If you look at, we also feel that from further promoting innovation, both on the Dutch national level, but also on the EU level, continues to be important. And we also feel it's important to take a leading position in the development of that EU regulatory framework and everything around it, meaning that on the side of contribution, we feel that we have a role to play in building it further and supporting the EU developments. Having said that, to the next slide, that also involves building on national capabilities, because it is about the EU, but it's also about building our own strategic developments. And as such, we see that, for example, countries like France, Germany, also the United States, Switzerland, we see that they are valuing the strategic value of, and they see the strategic value of crypto assets. And they're very active in designing a strategic framework around it, looking at both the upside, whilst also be very risk alert, so to speak, without being wary. And therefore, I think it's important that we see that strategic value and that we help to further develop on that and work on that. One of the things that is important is for the Dutch, on Dutch level, to also keep an eye on international taxonomy, support it, help to define it, but also make sure to implement it. So not reinvent the wheel fully on a national level, but also closely look at what happens on the international side. We are warmly supportive of designing a Dutch crypto asset strategy. And we also feel that a three-pillar collaboration is important. And with three pillars, we mean the financial sector, but also the regulatory and supervisory and governmental bodies. And as a third one, the crypto industry. The dialogue between the three will help on building and further developing important issues, but also help in building further frameworks, but also working on innovation as such. It is important to also capitalize on best practices. Those best practices are also input in further defining frameworks, but also also for the supervisory authorities. And the sandbox as such, innovation, experimentation, but also being allowed to experiment, being allowed to have an open dialogue on perhaps not the already secured items, but innovative, new, experimental information. It's important that the sandbox facilitates that and have that open dialogue to be sure to practice before you really become
Marianne,
to go
so
further.
Do you see these recommendations as also something that you would want the government to take a step in on, or the regulatory bodies, or is the Dutch Association of Banks also going to take a leading role in this?
Well, the leading role, I think we're here. What we're saying is to encourage a dialogue, and I'll come to it on the next slide, by the way, because there we have a few next steps, so to speak. If you go back one second, just to be because important to mention as well before I answer your question, okay, is that we do feel that the barriers for banks should be lowered. And that's why I really want to mention that and not skip go to the next slide.
What barriers would you be referring to in particular? What lower barriers to banks? What?
What we now see is that it's if you look at the position paper, we do highlight it. If you look at, for example, custodial services, but also perhaps even providing advisory, or at least advisory retail client-related services. There is, if you look at the stance of the regulatory or the supervisory authorities, it is volatile. It is very important for investors to be very alert and not take too many risks. However, we do have in the Netherlands also duty of care, meaning that banks already have an experience in coaching and supporting and alerting clients on whether risks are becoming too much in relation to their risk profile. So banks can actually have a constructive role there to help protect clients further in terms of investments. So it's something that at least we have to discussion and an area we could discuss on and see how opportunities and best practices could reinforce themselves. Yeah. And if you look at governmental leading role, we do think a Dutch crypto asset strategy is something that is that needs to be supported at least by the Dutch government because it's part of their role. However, dialogue and making sure that together you collaborate on shaping it and designing it, I think, or the NVB thinks is just as important. If you look at the next steps, perhaps. Yeah. Because in a way, I would like to stress, and we would like to stress collaboration. DLT, crypto assets. It's all about decentralization, but also about ecosystems. So if you really want to continue building on innovation, you need to develop an ecosystem. You need to be part of the ecosystem. You need to design them. And the same goes for infrastructures and developing services on those infrastructures. So it is important to continue that collaboration, and in that sense, 2 tokens is an important initiative that supports that role and is taking a very important role in the road mapping and getting the stakeholders together at the table to work on the next level of crypto assets. It is also about balancing opportunities and risks. Innovation is easy, but it's also important not to just see the attractive opportunities, but also really calculate in risks and make sure that if you go to the market or if you are making an infrastructure operational, it needs to be really checked, needs to be really safe, needs to be resilient. And that is something which is sometimes a bit underestimated if you look in the area, if you look at the area of innovation. It's always, and maybe banks are prudent, but that's not for nothing. That is because they have a history of fiduciary responsibilities. We have been wrong sometimes, and we have been right sometimes. But we have been learning on that as well. So it's important to also take that into account.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a balancing act. I think that's quite a challenge for my institution to balance indeed the new opportunities that arise, but to keep the risks low for your existing customers and also match the expectations of society. So that's definitely a challenge. But let's dive into that a bit further in the panel discussion, if that's okay with you, because then we can move on to the next item to keep the pace in. So thank you for now, Marjan, and I'll see you in a bit.
Thank you so much.
And then we would like to go to Alex and Marleen here next to me. Welcome, Marleen, in the studio.
Thank you, Don.
Yeah, very nice to see you again. And we'd like to briefly go with you through the use cases for tokenization that we've identified. I think it's a lot of information for a relatively brief period, so you will probably have to keep the pace in as well. But
I think we're going to keep it short. I would like to elaborate just a little bit more on what 2 tokens actually really is about. And it's about the real-life use cases that we collaboratively are producing with so many people, for which I think we need to thank Alex for bringing us, for bringing us all together. What makes 2 tokens special is that I think we're walking the talk. We're actually implementing ideas and bringing forward innovative ideas and making practical use cases that can be used within a relatively short period of time. So we've had so many use cases again, which were presented to us, and we picked 3.
Yeah, we can only do 3.
Yes, to do them well, and I think it's exciting for what is coming up. We also know, I think that's also important, that the use cases which we have done in 2020 are actually going to be going into a next phase in 2021. So they did not end. The proof of concept is there and it tastes like more. So we will definitely hear more information about EBL, about Next Gen Capital. We might even start using the 2 token in the future. So it's quite cool to see what is happening to these use cases, how everybody collaborates, how the technological providers, legal advisors, people from the industry, everybody's collaborating and bringing forward such nice things. 3 use cases for 2021. So the first use case which we are going to do is tokenizing energy.
Right.
And I'll later on elaborate a little bit more on what that means to us.
Yep.
The second use case is digitizing the notary.
Yeah.
An age-old. We can
maybe you should elaborate also
on how we approach it. So later on, I'll dive into that. So the second use case is the digital notary, and the third use case is tokenizing invoices.
Yeah.
3 completely separate use cases, again, all with a link to age-old things that we are already currently are doing, and where we're actually applying new technology on making things easier, more efficient, better working, while respecting the existing laws and regulation. So how are we approaching these use cases? We start by exploring, by creating a business case.
Yep.
We clearly define what the outcome needs to be and where we need to be within in a short period of time. We will map it onto the ITSA standards and make sure that we can basically use the token roadmap which we've developed last year, and extend the token roadmap where necessary, or dive deeper into certain details when that becomes necessary. And I think, again, what I already explained, that is so special that there's so many experts involved from universities, from legal offices, etc., that are jointly bringing these use cases forward for them to have a life after as well.
Yep.
So use case 1, tokenization of energy. In short, what we are going to do, we're going to start with tokenizing the actual asset, which means that we're going back to tokenizing like really minimal things, such as a solar panel,
Windmill.
a windmill, but even a LED light. And what we mean by tokenizing that asset, either tangible or intangible, we mean that we're going to dive into the know your asset principle. So what does this asset really mean? What does it bring forward? And how can we translate that to a number of kilowatt hours, for example? And once we have that information, and once we can link that actual information to one specific asset, then in the next stage we can connect financing to it, of course.
Yep.
Because this is already being done, right? By Catena. This is their business case.
This is one of the business case we are rolling out, and yes, they already can track and trace information out of certain assets, but to write it into a smart contract and to see how we can work with it, that is the use case for the upcoming year.
Yeah.
So that means chipping into solar panels, being able to retrieve specific information related to that specific solar panel, which means that in the end, after, I don't know, phase 2 or phase 3 of this project, you can invest not into a solar park. No, you can invest into a specific solar panel with a specific number, which brings forward all kind of tax benefits, but also user benefits and more transparency.
And so, in your view, would this be a payment token or an investment token?
I think in this case, payment and investment will get very, very close to each other.
Because if we do payment, we have to go to the central banks, right? So
Yeah, no, but I think this is a very good example case where use that's very close to financing the actual asset.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So that's good that we're doing this use case, because then we can actually help define whether it's a financial instrument or payment instrument.
Yeah.
And what regulations should be applied.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it should be good to note that Rotterdam School of Management wrote a paper on this already. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so it's the universities are.
No, I think that's really nice topic to dive into this year.
Yeah.
And so what is the next one?
Yeah, so the next one is tokenizing the notary. For some people, this might sound scary, but it is happening. So there are not one, but many notaries joining this this initiative already, where we say we can either push back and don't move forwards in this direction, or we can embrace it. And there's also a lot of regulation changing for the notaries themselves this year, which we are actually going to use in tokenizing the shareholder registry, which we now still know as this paper booklet, changing it into a digital registry where transfer of ownership doesn't necessarily need to be done by presence of a notary.
So every share is certified and that's turned into a token? Is that how it works?
No, we're most likely are going as far that not shares don't need to be certified anymore, but where we can actually tokenize the BV shares themselves.
Wow.
Within the Netherlands.
Wow.
So it's an exciting an exciting step, and that's obviously the shareholder registry. But once you've done that, you can. Why is it so beneficial? At least for a large number of companies. One is we can standardize a lot. We can standardize certificates of incorporation or company documentation, but we can also make sure that we create a level of identification of the shareholders themselves, talking about uniqueness of users, and that we only need to onboard one person once. Why would we need to do that over and over again by all these notaries in the network?
There'll be a lot of benefits there, especially also indeed basically being able to work completely remotely as we're forced to do now as well, right?
So, and Leonard is in the call, but it would be interesting. Is this a security token or utility token? Depends how you use it.
Depends on the conditions in the end.
No, this is, I would say neither one, unless you use it to finance the underlying entity. But we will start with the share itself.
I see a nod from Leonard, so I think we're on the right track here.
Yes, and the third use case is tokenizing invoices, and factoring as we know it in the traditional market. It's been done on quite a large scale already, but it's so difficult to make good slices and dices of all these invoices with all very short lead times, different debtors, creditors, etc. That you can now very easily link, categorize, and offer as a very transparent portfolio towards an investor, and that from the investor's point of view, where the investor can categorize and say, like, okay, I want to be financing invoices based on categories X, Y, and Z, and you will be able to get it out of the bucket. So. We have a very little time to dive into the use cases, of course, but we will do during the upcoming year.
We have a whole year.
We have a whole year. So.
You can expect many, I think, masterclasses, information sessions. If you are interested, please join us and join one of the use cases. The more people, the more brains on how we can bring this forward and how we can make this happen, the better. And eventually these use cases will translate into executive summaries, white papers, which we will present to the market.
Yep.
Yeah, because I think what we're seeing on the screen right now, these are the results of last year's use cases, right?
Yes, yes. So, there was a lot of work that went into creating these white papers.
So you hope someone will read it. Yes.
Well, I know that Leonard reads them, so and he hasn't maybe read all of them yet, but yes. was a lot of
It's
work.
nice that all the information that you gather in this process gets deposited in a place where people can reuse it and learn from it. So I think it's really useful for people to have access to this.
Yeah, when it comes to Next Gen Capital, it's been already very often used. Because like when we start such a product, it's like this is your starting point. These are the basics, and from there on you can elaborate to whatever you need.
Yeah, and so every use case has a captain. And last year you were the captain for Next Gen Capital. Now you're a coach, right?
Yep.
So, and every captain will present their use case in a separate webinar because by itself every use case has a very unique set of players and stakeholders that form the coalition, if you will. And that's what makes this so exciting. But I should stress, every use case has a beginning and an end, and we have deliverables, and we know what we're working towards. This shouldn't be an academic exercise.
No.
Right?
No, great. So I think it's really nice to bring it all in practice, and what of course also helps always is to have a discussion. So I'm really looking forward as well to kickstart that together with Kim Schneider, Marianne, who we've had before on behalf of the Dutch Association of Banks, and Leonard Franke from the Authority for Financial Markets, to put it in English. Kim, could you maybe introduce yourself briefly before we start off the discussion, so people have an understanding who we have on the line?
Yes, of course. Thank you. My name is Kim Schneider, and I work as a blockchain specialist at Rabobank. My work contains a lot of different projects. I focus on cryptocurrencies and tokenization, but also on data sharing platforms, for example, for the real estate sector or for know your customer purposes. We also do a lot of work in self-sovereign identity. The latest visible case in the news was for storing corona test results when entering an event. Maybe you have seen it. So that's in short.
Yeah, thank you. That's very interesting to have you at the table while you're so active in this space. And Leonard, could you also briefly introduce yourself?
Well, thank you, Don. I'm Leonard. I'm from the Authority Financial Markets. Working there in the DLT, the blockchain area, primarily, I would say, looking at it from an operational and IT risk perspective as well. I'm active in the MiCAR regulation, development of it, the DLT pilot regime, and there is also a review of the CSDR upcoming. That's what I do at the AFM during the weeks, I would say. Just talk to companies, talk about business cases. We evaluate propositions. We look at license registrations, all kinds of things that have to do with supervision and regulation, but also talking to Ministry of Finance to help them to get MiCAR up and running as soon as possible.
Yeah, and so maybe as a first question for you, so what kind of cases do you see now that the AFM, in which ways does the AFM now get confronted with crypto assets or token assets?
That's very wide. I would say we see what has been said also by Claire in the real estate, a lot happening. Recently, we had a question about persons that want to do in the energy transition, that want to provide, for example, tokenized buildings, give them an identity and let them trade their own carbon credits.
Wow.
And we also see companies that say we want to do a crowdfunding platform on a blockchain. Think of something that can be done on a blockchain and it comes over our desk. I would say.
Okay. Yeah.
And that also has, and it's very wide. Also in the identity space, we see things happening. So it's not very limited. It's a very wide scope.
Okay, interesting place to be. Hey, and Marianne, maybe nice also to learn a little bit about your background at ABN AMRO, as you were just speaking on behalf of the Dutch Association of Banks. What are you currently working on there?
I work at the compliance department, and I'm currently supporting the organization and also innovation in advising and assessing impacts of both the crypto economy, but also on the regulatory side and also on stakeholder engagement. So, that's basically what I'm doing.
Okay, yeah, I think it's really nice. I think it's nice to see that also that the banks already took a very active role in exploring the potential in this technology and what could happen here. And what I would just want to do here is just launch a poll for our audience to also warm themselves up to think along with you. Yeah, maybe good to start with you, Kim, as well. So, what kind of potential do you see? I think you mentioned that you were working on quite a variety of projects. Where do you think we'll see the first things taking off that tokenized assets will become a part of our daily life?
Yes, well, looking at Rabobank and the project we are running at this moment internally, I really think this might be at the carbon credit, like also Leonard mentioned. I think this is an interesting part. I don't know if it's the first thing we will see as a retail consumer in our daily lives, but for corporates and farmers, it might be really interesting. On the utility part, I really think initiatives like the 2 token are very interesting because consumers can use it in their daily lives. So I really hope you will proceed this year with the 2 token.
Yeah.
And I also think payment tokens can be interested for banks, but at this moment, it's not really clear yet which role we can take in this playing field. And of course, it's also depending on the regulatory stuff.
Yeah. No, indeed. So I think as I look at what the poll results are saying, still most people think that the payment means might be the most, the biggest opportunity for crypto assets. What do you think about that, Marianne? They might be referring to central bank digital currencies, for example, as something that's has been in the news quite a lot. What's your view on this position?
Yeah, it's a payment security. Adding to what Kim said, I was thinking also that if you look at security token initiatives, if you see what's happening, for example, in Germany or in France, whether it's ICO types of initiatives, but also bond issuance. I still feel that there is still it has an infrastructural side and a proposition side, but I feel that a lot is going to happen there. You see parties entering the stage, and you see that regulatory developments are kind of keeping track on things. So it is like a harmonious effort, so to speak. If you look at payments. I agree with Kim. There is still a lot of uncertainty. There is still a lot to be discovered. Having said that, I think it does make sense for banks to keep really an eye on things. If you look at central bank digital currencies, it's interesting to see, for example, that China is pushing quite a bit. They have their own motives. Interesting there, it's a strongly coordinated and controlled state effort. If you look at the United States, they're much more moving towards supporting private market efforts.
Yeah.
And the EU is more or less in between. So that also takes me to question, is it worthwhile to discover the CBDC initiative as well? And should indeed there be a collaborative effort between the financial sector, central banks and governments to really explore this further?
Yeah, I'm also really curious how that will evolve over the coming years when we will see more discussions probably in that field. I'll put up the next poll already so the audience could already take another vote. But I'm curious about your view, Leonard, on general crypto assets. Right, so you see a lot of cases coming by. Where do you think will people see this on a more daily perspective very soon?
Unmute.
I can't hear you, Leonard.
You're muted.
I think we should all keep our eye on where it adds value to the current society. I mean, does suddenly blockchain-based payments are so much different from the other payments? Where is the added value of it? And if I think on the previous poll where it does add value, if I say, okay, there is an asset token or a tokenized asset, whatever it may be, and there is a tokenized euro, and you can do delivery versus payment on a shared infrastructure, and you get all three, I would say, then maybe we are going ahead of things. If you look at the crypto assets, that's also where Marleen with the next generation capital of last year, the technology allowed them to fractionize securities to a very low level on a very economical scale. So there it adds value to do so.
Yep.
And if you then what on the use case of this year can take on the notaries with put BV directly on the blockchain and have that directly digitized, then we are digitizing the whole end-to-end value chain. And then it adds value, and then you can say, okay, what do I need in that digital environment, in that digital economy? And that can be an investment token, that can be a utility token, that can be a payment token. But look at the case. Where can we create value?
Yeah, I fully agree.
Yeah, and
go ahead, Marianne.
To add, I think the fractional ownership, I think, is an important one because that can really be added value to certain investors, for example, smaller investors, but also towards, if you look at, for example, SME, the small and medium enterprises, the crowdfunding type of initiatives. If you can lower the barrier, you can lower the scale, you can increase the liquidity. I think that is an important one that has the potential for added value and to really to offer more access to certain investor groups as well in a responsible manner, by the way.
No, for sure. I think if we look at the current poll, we see actually there's quite a tie sort of between the the three different options of tokens.
So we have no winner.
No, we have a slight winner in the investment token, which is seen as the most interesting part. And there's also a question from the audience by Jeroen, who asked whether ABN AMRO specifically would want to become a custodian of crypto assets. So I'm curious, maybe Marianne, what your take is on that.
I think if you look at, for example, the initiatives that we are taking or developing in, like Pictor, which is a permission network, also offering transactional and custodial services, which is in an experimental phase, by the way. I think the bank feels that in due time, custodial services as being part of the financial cycle is probably one of the services that could be offered by banks. And if you look at other countries, like for example in the United States and in Germany, you see banks are becoming more or less interested, and they are able to start looking into that direction. So I have the feeling that will also be happening in the Netherlands, but it might take time to make sure that we do it in a responsible manner. There's still quite some issues to be resolved. So this is something that will not happen overnight. This will become part of a bigger effort. And in that sense, I think that in due time it will happen and we will be looking into it, yes.
So Marianne, under what regulatory regime does Pictor resort? Is it under the Dutch regime? So does it come on Lennart's desk?
To my knowledge, it is an international effort. So they are now moving towards, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the UK FCA side, and perhaps also some French and German elements in there. But I'm not sure, to be honest. It's international. So in a way that offers the opportunity also to look into which regulator is most applicable, also considering the participants and the area where they work for.
The tokens have no boundaries, right? So you know that, of course. You work with Euroclear at an exchange. So Marleen.
Yeah, but our tokens do have boundaries, of course.
They do?
Due to the regulation that applies.
It's in the end the legal framework that determines a lot, indeed.
Absolutely, yeah. But the nice thing is that you can integrate those boundaries into the tokens if you like to. So you can predetermine who is allowed to trade those tokens, for example.
So it means if I buy something on an exchange, it has to stay within the confines of the Netherlands.
Well, that's something you would be able to set up if you want that. That's where the use of such a smart contract would come in nicely.
Yeah. So I'm curious for Kim to ask on this side, as you were also part of the group that created the paper from the Dutch Association of Banks. Let's say this is, what kind of role do you think that banks should play in basically evolving this technology? Is it something that you feel that you need to really become a center of excellence of knowledge as well? I mean, within the ecosystem. So what kind of role do you see there that banks can take?
Yes, I think different roles. I really think we are already working on projects like these. So I really think what you said on the knowledge base, we already have some. We are also looking narrowly now to the MiCA regulation. So yes, I really think we should have a role in this, and we can help our customers that will face these questions and projects in their daily lives. So I think that's where we can be of added value, because of the customers of the banks will have questions about this and also are willing to use blockchain technology or tokenization. So yeah, I really think we can be of help there.
As a trusted advisor and a reference point for your customers, in any case, you see a big role.
Yes, and as well on the other side, that our business model might change on some points within the bank, and some products will change. So that's also why I think we should be involved.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really interesting, but definitely also challenging, right? Because I think indeed, as was mentioned before in the highlights of the report, is that there's quite a challenge between sort of taking a certain risk when you want to pursue these new technologies and try to look at new implementations, while at the same time there's a lot of risk to be balanced for your current customers that you want to keep safe, for the expectations of society. What do you think there is one of the biggest challenges on your that you see?
Yeah, I wanted to say that's why our job is so nice and so diverse. But
hard but nice.
That's what Leonard says, right?
Yeah,
yeah, maybe. But also our job. Yes, I really think we are waiting a bit at this moment on the regulatory regimes, right? So I really think yeah, it would be nice if we could collaborate more to see what is possible. Yeah, the boundaries that are already mentioned, the regulatory boundaries, and not having a clear vision on taxonomy, on definitions. So yeah, sharing more knowledge with each other and collaborate.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. But I think you mentioned regulatory, right? So, Leonard, what do you think is the evolution there? I think you've been really active in all the new regulations coming up. What do you think is something we should look out for, or which way should we indeed let our voice hear to think about the new rules that are being drawn up?
Oh, no, that's a very open question.
And you've got.
Well, I think
30 seconds.
I invite everybody to take up the 200 and something pages from MiCA and spend a nice evening on the fireplace or whatever.
Yeah.
I think what we will see, it's a
to light the fireplace or to read it.
Both. Keep yourself warm. So I think it's a very open regulation, and we try to keep the level playing field, not to over-regulate the new space. As has already been said by Claire, the securities are securities and are regulated through MiFID. It's like a waterfall model. You drop it in at the top, and everything that's not within MiFID goes to the MiCA regulation. Yeah.
Right.
So there we see the e-money tokens, the securities, the service providers, and the utilities, whatever, coming in MiCA regulation. I think it's good that we get a level playing field in Europe. And it's not only the Netherlands, it's Germany, France, everybody's contributing. So we will see all the good from the other countries, which have been mentioned a lot, coming into that MiCA regulation, if I'm not mistaken. What can we do? I think we already had talks with the Dutch Society of Banks. We have other talks with the community to make sure that that this MiCA regulation goes in the best possible way. There will be a successor of the AML-D5, as I'm not mistaken, but that's more the DNB kind of thing. So I would say, well, seminars like this do help.
Yep.
Does that help you a little bit or not?
Well, it helps for me, and I think Alex, Marlene, I hope I can speak for you as well. That it really helps to just speak up about where the thoughts are going, what people are thinking, and which way things are heading. But I think we're actually also. I'm also looking at the director here, and she's looking very much time sensitive on my end. So I'd like to ask you for just a final comment. In any case, a big thank you, Kim, Marianne, and Leonard, for sharing your thoughts here. Any last thing, a very short one, that you would want to highlight before we head off?
Yeah, Leonard is the first.
Oh, Leonard is the first. I think I would love to see much more experiments in the sector.
We will facilitate.
Contact you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
More. Yes. We are talking to institutions about experiments. But I think we need to experiment lots more, and not only talk about the Bitcoin cases, but about the other tokenization cases.
Yeah,
a lot more interesting.
Think about delivery versus payment. Think about all the nice things that can be done with this shared technology.
Yeah,
I think we have so much opportunities. We need much more experimentation.
Yes.
Thanks, Leonard. Marianne, anything from your end to add?
Yeah, I had the same answer in mind. The benefits of experimentation, because that means that you're actually working on it. And in addition, I think it's important in that experimentation that there is an open dialogue and an open, constructive way of working with the relevant stakeholders, which includes, by the way, the supervisory authorities, because they are dearly needed, and this is something we are in together. So that will be my plea, ecosystem development and collaboration.
Great. Thanks, Marianne. Kim, any last words from your end?
Yes, in line with that, I really hope we can follow up with the recommendations we did in the NVB position paper. That would be great. And
well, thanks indeed for all of you to share that. And I think we'll share the report as well with the attendees, just like the other cases that we talked about earlier. Marlene, thank you for joining us today, and Alex. I think it's been great fun to get all this knowledge at the table and to discuss what the potential is. Any last word from you?
No, yeah, I can't wait for what 2021 will bring.
You had a great run last year, so can't wait for this year.
Yeah, well, just obviously there are some challenges starting, I guess, Friday.
Yeah.
But we've
the lockdown.
We've worked past that, and you see that innovation is even it's working out even better, because it's easier to contact, to collaborate with each other. We've all become used to even having such a conference remote. So I see that at least from my point of view, drives innovation and makes it possible to even go quicker and really implement things. Yeah,
no, I think that definitely does. So I think it's really nice that we can bring so much knowledge together in this condensed program. So I'm also looking forward to the next steps from that perspective. How about you, Alex?
No, I'm very excited about that we're maturing. Right, the industry is maturing. 2 years ago, we were asked, please, Alex, if you do this, don't mention the word crypto. Now, the banks are talking about crypto assets. That's like cursing. I said, we can use that word now. But so we're maturing, and even my mother-in-law is starting to think, I can actually use crypto. Well, then we are really looking at adoption. So let's bring the ecosystems together. Holland FinTech, 2 tokens. Society as a whole can benefit, like Elena just said.
For sure. No, so thank you very much. Thank you very much all for watching. And of course, Robert, Claire, Alex, Marlene, Kim, Marianne, Leonard, we're all very happy that you were able to join us today. And I'm really looking forward to see you on the next session. Have a great evening.